Hi, it's me, Ingridine of P, and I'm doing a book review of Unmasking Autism by Dr. Devon Price. And this is a book for late diagnosed autistic people or people who suspect that they're autistic and that have masked their autism their entire lives and need a guide for unmasking. Devon Price is a trans man as well, so a lot of that will come up in this book. There is also the fact that this book was not really as much of a guide to unmasking as I thought it was, but I really like this book, and you can see that through the amount of look at the amount of bookmarks I have in this book, okay? So first I'll go through the red thread that goes through the book, and that is that we need to find the 5 times where we were most the 5 best moments of our life, or like the moments where we found that we were most alive, and what values we can gather from that, and how are these values important to us, what do they mean for us, and trying to build a life based on those values. So let's get right into the quotes. I have a lot of quotes. Autistic people frequently experience inertia in starting a task and challenges in breaking complex activities down into small steps that follow a logical sequence. This can make everything from basic household chores to applying to jobs and filing taxes incredibly challenging or even impossible without help. Relatable. Then there was a quote about autistic people who are masked. Report cards called me a joy to have in class and sensitive, which is a sneaky way of saying they thought I cried too much and got hurt when kids were mean to me. Which I relate to. Then there's a chart here about traits that are associated with female autism, which I relate to most of them. But there's emotional, psychological, behavioral, and social. I relate to all of them, mostly the emotional ones. Strikes others as emotionally immature and sensitive, prone to outbursts or crying jags, sometimes over seemingly small things, has trouble recognizing or naming one's feelings, ignores or suppresses emotions until they bubble up and explode, may become disturbed or overwhelmed when others are upset but uncertain how to respond or support them, goes blank and seems to shut down after prolonged socializing or when overstimulated. Then it talks about the psychological, there's social anxiety, is perceived by others as moody and prone to bouts of depression, may have been diagnosed with mood disorders such as bipolar disorder or personality disorder such as borderline or narcissistic personality disorder, fears rejection intensely and tries to manage how other people feel to avoid it, has an unstable sense of self, perhaps highly dependent on the opinions of others. Yeah, you get the gist. And here it says how we create the mask. We erect rigid rules around our lives to manage stress and make an unpredictable social world feel a little less scary. Make eye contact for this many seconds. Eat this easy to prepare meal at this time of day. Never talk about yourself for too long. Try as we might to be agreeable, people still comment on how oversensitive or immature we are, or simply imply we're hard to read. When we struggle, people talk down to us or try to socially mother us into more normative behavior. True, that's basically the story of my life. Then it talks about a trans person who said that bras were uncomfortable for gender reasons and because I can't deal with tight clothes. Personally relatable. I'm skipping a lot of the early part of the book because we want to get to the good stuff. I would make observations that were just literal facts, like, oh, hey, you got a haircut. And people would think I was making fun of them. And so that was highly traumatic for this person. Many women who have been repeatedly rejected and traumatized for being autistic develop an insecure sense of self, a reasonable fear of rejection, and big, overly sensitive emotions that reflect the distress they almost constantly feel. Nyla was such a woman who was incorrectly labeled as BPD before finally arriving at an autism diagnosis. She had all the traits that tend to overlap: insecure self-esteem, fear of being abandoned that would prompt emotional breakdowns, meltdowns, and an unstable sense of who she was. So that's how autism and BPD can be mixed up for each other. One prominent experience among ADHDers is rejection-sensitive dysphoria, feeling intense panic and distress from receiving negative or even neutral social feedback from other people. Because ADHDers find rejection so terrifying and painful, their social behavior can be just as restrained and people-pleasing as that of masked autistics. So that's why autistics can appear oblivious. ADHDers can appear oblivious to social norms as well. When neurotypical people equate functioning with being less disabled, they fail to recognize the immense hidden labor that goes into appearing normal. It also misses how oppressive having to seem normal is by itself. True words. Many autistic people find it challenging to transition between activities. Each change requires a lot of what psychologists call executive functioning, a skill linked to planning and initiating behavior. We find it challenging to gear shift. Neurotypical may not know we're disabled, but they identify some key flaw that is associated with disability. We're childish or bitter, self-absorbed, or too angry. Maybe we're just awkward and make people cringe. Avoiding being seen in these ways becomes our core motivation in life. Each day a battle between the heavy armor we wear and the embarrassing characteristics that armor was designed to cover up. Are you afraid of seeming stupid or childish? When you were young, did people accuse you of being cruel? Did you come to believe you were finicky or selfish? And then it talks about what kinds of things that you did not want to be seen as, and what was the most painful to hear, and why you had to pretend to be the opposite of what you wanted to avoid being called as. Then it talks about how masking involves camouflaging, like hiding, and compensation to overcome. Most of us have to mask everything from our information processing style to our lack of coordination to our limited food preferences to the fact that we require more rest than neurotypical people are expected to. So this is a person explaining ADHD. It's like going to the grocery store and only being able to bring home what you can sneak into your pockets when nobody is looking, and everybody else just gets to just go through the checkout and buy as much as they want. So they don't understand why you find shopping so stressful. True. Autistic children who present the biggest hassle are the ones most likely to be referred to services, whereas those who can conceal their struggles are granted tentative approval, but risk never being understood or empathized with. Sad. This is a good chart, and it's a chart with, I always thought it was bad to be this, so I had to pretend to be this. I did this by behaving this way. And so we can choose the one that is, I was taught it was bad to be clueless, pathetic. So I had to pretend to be independent. I did this by behaving this way, nodding or laughing even when I had no idea what's going on, developing unique private habits and hacks to make it possible for me to hold my life together, making sure my life looks put together on paper, even at the expense of my health and happiness. Uh, so when we're upset and uncomfortable, we often fail to recognize until we're nearly on the verge of a complete breakdown. And it says that when we mask less, then we can tune into our bodies and understand our bodies more. When we spend too much time online, it can limit how much practice we get interacting and communicating out in the world, contribute to feelings of loneliness and depression, and further the detachment so many of us feel from our bodies. Hiding our struggles away from the world is not a productive means of gaining acceptance. And there's a difference between using the internet as a way to develop a sense of fluency and competence and retreating to it because we felt that we have no other choice. So yeah, I'm really in the internet, unfortunately. Neurodiverse women and gender non-conforming people are similarly preyed upon by gender-critical transphobic communities. And I've told you guys the story about how I ended up in the TERF, radical feminism community, because I am the specific kind of person that they're looking for. Female-bodied, autistic woman, you know. We often have a hard time recognizing when someone's actions have hurt us or made us uncomfortable. It takes time for me to reflect on how and why someone's actions may have hurt me. Because of alexithymia, basically. It wasn't that their efforts had never been enough or that they were fundamentally wrong or bad. They simply hadn't been treated with the compassion they deserved or given the tools that would have allowed them to flourish. Naming their position in society as a disabled person helped them to externalize that would have been long internalized. It proved that none of their suffering had been their fault. Then here's a chart for like an old label and a new label. And for example, you could say someone who's stubborn is persistent, or somebody who is distractible is perceptive, and somebody who's anxious is cautious. Sensitive is not bad. If we were talking about a medical detector, sensitive would be good. Or a bomb-sniffing dog, you want a good instrument to be sensitive. Why is it bad to be very skilled at sniffing out the emotional bombs in the environment? So here we're reframing autistic stereotypes with another chart by saying like this: I was told I was sensitive, but actually I am perceptive, emotionally attuned, and compassionate. I value this quality in myself because I recognize mistreatment very well. I'm good at taking the emotional temperature of the room. I'm in touch with my feelings and with the feelings of others. Or you could have, I was told I was childish, but actually I am curious, open-minded, and joyful. I value this quality in myself because I'm great at learning and growing. I experience the full range of human emotion, and I take pleasure from the small things in life. Thank you. If an adult is creating jewelry that they sell on Etsy, they're seen as enterprising. But if somebody instead devotes their free time to something that gives them pleasure but doesn't financially benefit anyone, it's seen as frivolous or embarrassing or even selfish. Such as this YouTube channel. Okay. I can't share this with anybody in real life. And it talks about how fandoms help autistic people build a sort of community where they're accepted. And then discovering our values. She was trying to fit in within the lines neurotypical people had drawn for her, but her efforts all seemed to fail. The instructions she was given didn't line up with people's actual unspoken expectations. It was paralyzing. Eventually, she decided to stop focusing on what others desired from her and let her life be guided by actual values. So then there's this values-based integration exercise where you try to go through the moments with why these moments were special. And then see how all these moments can be grouped together through values, which will be important later. Here is where autism is such an integral part of your being, and that it's maybe not a loss that you're autistic, you know? Without autism, I wouldn't have completed my PhD at age 25. I wouldn't have memorized thousands of song lyrics. I wouldn't have befriended dozens of genderqueer weirdos with nerdy interests, or written anywhere near as many words as I have. If autism hadn't made it hard for me to drive, I might not have moved to Chicago. I might have chosen to live in a city without public transit, and I wouldn't have met my partner of over a decade. Each aspect of who I am is tightly interwoven with the rest, and on good days, I love myself enough to be grateful for almost every single one. So yeah, I don't know how to drive. My autism and ADHD make it hard for me to drive. So, I have lived in places where I haven't needed to drive. Now I live in a place where you need to drive, but, you know, maybe I would have chosen a different life had I been able to drive. And I wouldn't trade that for anything, you know? Self-stigma is a liar. You're not cringy, too much, a baby, or a cold-blooded creep. You're a marginalized person with many beautiful and unique qualities. Okay. When you're designing an interior, this is about homes. Design for how you actually live and not how you aspire to live. Your space must be designed to accommodate the reality of your life without shame or judgment. Okay? I've done a tour of my house, which you can check out if you look up the hundreds of videos on my channel. Autistic people frequently rely on beloved objects to provide consistency, familiarity, and emotional grounding. Cleaning and getting rid of unnecessary things causes decision fatigue for many of us, because we have to think about every possible scenario and stuff. And that's why my parents are hoarders, and that's why I have a hard time cleaning up. The best predictor of how you will use a space is how you already use it. If you never eat dinner in the dining room, maybe the space can become a game room instead. Yeah. To acknowledge the needs of autistic workers at the workplace, is to listen to the canaries in the coal mine. Our sensitivities and needs help lay bare just how unfair many work expectations are, even for neurotypical people. So yeah, we can be like an asset for our workplace, for the other workers. So here we're talking about time, the concept of time, which is difficult. When we look at time as a series of, in the capitalist industrial time framework, any project that is abandoned or left unfinished is seen as a failure. Time wasted because it didn't result in a clear end product. But when we look at time as a series of cycles or spirals with goals that are ever shifting, we can recognize that learning and reflection we put into an aborted project, or even into masking, often pays off, just not the way we expected. So we can learn from our disappointments and failures. And so it tells us that we should slow down. Stillness helps neurodivergent minds process the huge quantities of data we take in. It's hard to let go of unfair expectations, basically, from the neurotypical world. So a simple sounding goal like do the dishes could quickly become a list of exhausting steps. Gather the dirty glasses and bowls from around the house, soak the filthy pots and pans, make space on the dish rack, wash and dry everything, put everything away, all while coping with nauseatingly gross odors and wet shirt sleeves that make upsetting static travel up and down our arms. Then it talks about autistic inertia, basically, that we have a hard time changing tasks and doing things because of our executive functioning. Also, neurotypicals tend to assume how to complete a chore task without instructing us exactly the details. Not understanding we can't intuit our way through unstated expectations. We may not recognize, for example, that a request to clean the bathroom includes scrubbing the shower, floors, sink, and mirrors, not just tidying up. Yeah, I was always confused by these things because it seemed like everybody knew what was expected, and I was like, what? And then people would think that I was lazy or they didn't do the thing right. So I relate. And so we need to find tools that don't rely on a non-autistic person for guidance and prompting, because those people aren't always there. Then it talks about the creepiness factor, because a lot of autistic men, mostly, I guess, are considered creepy because they have the following traits which overlap with autism. Having awkward, unpredictable behavior, an unnatural looking smile, laughter that occurred at unnatural times, speaking too long about a single topic, and not knowing when to end the conversation. So basically, autistic people tend to mansplain, kind of. But it's not their intention, you know. Yeah. Then it talks about everyday unmasking, like tips about how to unmask. Bring a STEM toy with you to a social gathering or public space and use it without shame. Express disagreement in a situation where you'd normally just nod along to keep this peace. Ask for something you usually feel too guilty to request. A lot of us find the natural flow of conversation challenging, either interrupting people at the wrong times or failing to jump in during a fast-paced exchange and being left out entirely. Yeah, that's kind of how I am. Most masked autistics need a lot of practice developing a strong sense of discernment, which is essentially using our own beliefs and perceptions to guide our behavior, rather than deferring to everyone else's fleeting reactions and impressions. Maskers tend to get distressed when people are unhappy with us, because disapproval has been so dangerous and painful for us in the past. Which is why I've lived my whole life according to everybody else's expectations. I've been in a position myself so profoundly inhibited I had no idea what my genuine preferences were, unable to recognize someone had crossed a boundary or made me uncomfortable until hours after the fact, when I was alone and had space to reflect. Yeah. Okay, then it talks about how parents of autistic children often say like, oh, but that's just how everybody lives, and that's because maybe they're autistic themselves, you know. Here is some affirmations for autistic people. Autism is not something I need to apologize for. Other people don't need to understand me or understand everything about autism in order to treat me with respect. I am coming out and asking for accommodations for me, not for anyone else. Good words. Here is about friendships. When we disagree, these friends, good friends, try to understand my perspective or reflect thoughtfully on why I might see things as I do. If I say something flippant or hurtful, they tell me for the sake of our friendship, but they don't relish in me feeling ashamed. They share what they want from me, ask for help when they need it, and they don't hold it against me when I fumble in my attempts to be there for them. So that's what I look for in a friend, you know. I have rejection sensitive dysphoria, so it's like kind of, I will have a reaction if somebody says something like, you know, that I was doing something bad, but ultimately I want to fix it, and if these friends never tell me, then they might develop a lot of resentment about me that I wasn't even aware of. And this is such a person here that they're explaining that wasn't a true friend. One person who came to mind was an incredibly charming friend whom I've noticed only ever tells me in a vague way that I've disappointed them, but refuses to actually explain what I've done or why. Okay, a pet peeve of mine. Autistic people can get better at reading people's facial expressions as we age and the more social contact we have. But we also deserve to live in a world where neurotypicals try just as hard to understand us. Because that would help us a lot. Common autistic communication needs clear expectations, explicit messaging, and reduced sensory social load. And for example, for explicit messaging, some accommodations you might request would be not assuming people can use facial expression, tone of voice, posture, breathing, or tears as indicators of emotion. Giving direct explanation of feelings, such as, I'm disappointed right now because blah, blah, blah. Recognition and respect the boundaries, such as, it doesn't sound like Sherry wants to talk about that right now. Not punishing or judging people for failing to read between the lines, and using clarifying questions. What would you like me to do about this? So that, it's clear. It's not like reading between the lines. And so in the workplace, carefully dispensed autistic candor can come in handy. So it can be useful for other neurotypical people in the workplace. Phrases like, no, I don't have time for that. I'm uncomfortable with this. What's your budget? Cut through elaborate social performances and render vague matters far more concrete. So that is good for us that autistic people exist, Of course, non-autistic people can do that too, but, non-autistic people process complex situations intuitively and efficiently, but make a lot of errors. So sometimes neurotypical people, non-autistic people, can't read between the lines either. And then, so we're talking about social programming. He says, the voice in my head that tells me it's pathetic that I don't know how to cook is not my voice, it's society programming. Speaking from within me, and I don't have to listen to it. Instead, I can call forth the side of myself that loves reading, writing, dance parties, and video games, acknowledging that if eating a lot of snacks and fast food gives me more time to honor that person, it's a worthwhile trade. I can also take time to remind myself that I live in a world that exalts hyper-independence to a ridiculous, isolating degree. Throughout history and across many different cultures, most individuals did not cook for themselves. Okay? It's not a failure, a moral failure that I don't know how to cook. Okay? And it says here, is your current life guided by your values? Let go of what isn't yours. Get help. What could you be doing? What are you doing that could be done by someone else? What are you doing that doesn't need to be done regularly as you're doing it, if at all? So for example, maybe you don't need to clean, vacuum your house every other day, because you were taught that that's the way to do things. Maybe you can do it less often, or you can hire somebody to help you with that if you have the resources for that, obviously. It's just, it's difficult to have the resources for that. Many of us give up on cooking, for example, because this is such a time and planning intensive task. Timing out one's cooking and grocery shopping schedules, prepping ingredients, remembering which ingredients you have, getting rid of leftovers in time, knowing which days in advance, which flavors and textures you'll be able to tolerate, can be so much more effort than it's worth. Instead, we let go of the burden entirely and rely on ready-made snacks and fast food. Or enlist the help of a loved one to do all the meal planning and prepping. Staying fed and having time for what matters most to us in life is enough. For many masked autistics, learning in adulthood that you have been secretly nursing a disability all your life is quite the world-shattering experience. Adjusting your self-concept is a long process. It can involve mourning, rage, embarrassment, and dozens upon dozens of wait, was that an autism thing? Revelations. Accepting our limitations is an equally important part of the journey. And so, we can make an existence as richly interdependent, sustainable, and meaningful. It's neurotypicals who characterize autism as a social disorder. Autistic people don't actually lack communication skills or the drive to connect. And it's because we need to find our own community. If you have been masked all your life, you probably will experience some anxiety in autistic-centered spaces. You might even find yourself judging other people's behavior. Remember that this is completely normal. Society has drilled very particular, often cruel rules into your head, and it can be jarring at first to see people violating some of them. Over time, you will get more comfortable with visibly neurodivergent behavior, and this will make it easier for you to open up too. Sometimes what society and the psychiatric establishment considers to be individual defect is in fact a perfectly benign difference that needs accommodation and acceptance instead. Being gay used to be classified as a mental illness. It never actually was one. So yeah, that I see is the connection between being gay and being autistic. It's like, it's not a disease, you know? And it talks about how unmasking at a personal level has its limits. An individual solution cannot fix a far-reaching system of oppression. We need to change society, okay? Many neurotypes are not suited to long workdays, lengthy commutes, nuclear families, and isolated independence. Arguably, none of us are well suited for that. The 9-to-5 workday is not evidence-based, but some of us suffer more visibly and pervasively than others. By tearing all this down, we can improve lives, basically. For a lot of care providers, belief in disability as a medical defect to be cured is absolute and unflinching. They routinely pathologize completely neutral, harmless autistic traits and behaviors, and these are healthy traits and behaviors in autistic people. Spending hours days alone sleeping or recharging after a socially demanding event or stressful project. Needing all the information before coming to a decision. Intense studying of a new favorite topic. Not putting energy towards expectations that seem unfair or arbitrary, such as wearing makeup or elaborate grooming. But it's not only, so after the initial shock and shame of getting a diagnosis, coming into a neurodiverse identity can prompt you to re-examine your entire life, all your old values, allowing you to build a slower, more peaceful, and more beautiful. Build something slower, more peaceful, more beautiful. But it's not only autistics who benefit from embracing neurodiversity that way. We all deserve to take a step back and ask ourselves whether our lives line up with our values, whether the work we do and the face shows to other reflects our genuine self, and if not, what we might want to change. And so this is the final chapter, the integration. And here I won't really take a quote. This is the most important part of the book. I could say that I wish that there was a little bit more of this in the book. So a masked person, like this, he talks about how he slept on an air mattress, which is something that I did too. Like, do we really need all this furniture and everything? But I was living a very, very minimalist life because I couldn't deal. Okay. So we're trying to find our values, putting our values together. And we have the value, and then what this value means to me, not what the dictionary says or what other people say that this value means. Then, at the end, you draw an image that represents your values and how they connect to one another. This image might represent a hobby or an experience that is important to you, or it might evoke one of the key moments where you felt particularly alive. The goal is to create an image that connects all your values together and helps you envision and remember all of them. So one person made a rainbow where each of the values was one of the colors in the rainbow. Another one chose to have an umbrella where love encompassed compassion and respect and different values underneath that umbrella. Devon Price has these values: candor, courage, inspiration, and passion, and put all these together as a shield, because this shield would allow Devon to be a protector for others, so that everybody can lead their best lives, basically. Because courage and candor, all these things, candor is like speaking out when somebody's mistreated. Courage is, allowing you to do things that other people may not want to do, saying yes to things, taking up space. Inspiration by empowering people. Passion is also kind of a shield. So that's what Devon drew on his activity sheet or whatever. And there are other people who have put it into different ways. I was thinking of how that would, and apparently Devon means defender, so that's kind of part of their whole identity. So what I was thinking is what would my values be? And I need to think about that quite a bit, because I don't really have 3 or 4 or 5 things. I would say that authenticity would be one of my values. Another one would be curiosity, I think. Another one would be compassion, or understanding, or I don't know exactly. It's not empathy, but it's more, a sense that I can be there for others, And I would take inspiration as well from Devon, Inspiration is important. But I can think of 10,000 other values. I haven't really thought about this very deeply. I mean, if I'm thinking of like the times that I was most happy in my life, I have a hard time connecting the dots. But if I were to like put all these values together, I think they would be like a garden. It would be a garden with different plants, and each plant was those core values that I want, and the values that I think are, the things that are corrupting that garden, like the weeds, I need to take them out, and water my values. So that's how I would see my values, as like a garden. Like I need to take care of these plants in order for them to provide garden. And so I want to be that garden where people can come, invited, not uninvited, but like I can invite them to my garden and have people heal and feel at peace in my garden, with the beautiful plants that are growing there. So that is my exercise that this book has led me to, and to realize that I can be myself, and whether I have autism or not, it doesn't matter. It actually was a very, very good book, in the sense that it is a very good book for INFPs, I would say. Even if they're not autistic. I just think it's a good book. I would have wished everything was a little bit more like the last chapter. That's all. Yeah, I gave this book 4 out of 5 on my Goodreads, but if I could put 4.5, I would. I just, you can't give half points on Goodreads. So yeah, have a great day, everybody. Bye.